This episode of the .NET Core podcast is brought to you in part by RJJ Software. RJJ Software is dedicated to helping you realize your company's digital potential through innovative solutions using the latest technologies. Utilizing the latest in .NET and cloud technologies, we can help you build the solution your business needs on time and under budget. We have world-class experience in cross-platform development using the latest iterations of the Microsoft technology stack. This includes .NET Core, SQL Server, and Azure. Is Azure not your thing? That's fine, because we have experience in AWS, GCP, Linode, and DigitalOcean too. We know what it means to have to be able to iterate quickly and how important DevOps practices are when it comes to remaining agile. As such, we have experts in the major build and release pipelines, from Azure DevOps to AWS, from Netlify to Travis CI, AppVeyor, and everything in between. So get in touch today at rjj-software.co.uk or check the show notes for a link. Hello everyone and welcome to the .NET Core podcast, the only podcast which is devoted to .NET, ASP.NET Core, EF Core, SignalR, and not forgetting the .NET community itself. I am your host, Jamie Gaprogman-Taylor, and this is episode 71, Azure and .NET with Labrina Loving. In this episode, I talked with Labrina Loving about her work as the lead engineer on the Azure platform and some of the most exciting things coming to C# 9. We actually recorded this episode in late 2020, but because of the podcast time machine wibbly wobbliness, we obviously were talking about C# 9 and .NET 5 before they came out. So let's sit back, open up a terminal, type in .NET New Podcast, and let the show begin. So thank you ever so much, Labrina, for taking some time out of your day, which I completely appreciate is an incredibly busy day anyway, regardless of what time of year, what the current situation is. So I appreciate you taking some time out to talk to me. So thank you ever so much for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. So I was wondering, before we begin, would you mind telling the listeners a little bit about yourself? Usually some people just go, oh yeah, I work for this company and I do this thing, or it's up to you, however you want to introduce yourself,
Yeah, that's that's probably the hardest question you'll have all day. Yes, my name is Labrina Loving. I have been in and around tech for almost 20 years now. I currently work at Microsoft, working with a lot of customers, small, what we call ISV partners and startups to help them move to the cloud, which is super exciting. As I mentioned, I've been around tech for the last 20 years, mainly focused in Microsoft technologies. I started off, as a .NET developer, working with a lot of large companies as a consultant. Then I moved into SharePoint. Then I moved into Dynamics. Then I moved back into .NET and mobile, and then back to cloud. So I've kind of been on this crazy journey in tech. That's been super exciting. I've got to go all over the world. Of course, not anymore, but got to go all over the world and meet a lot of great people. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. I've not had the illustrious career that you've had. I've only really been in sort of professional in development for about 10, 11, 12 years. But I do feel as though SharePoint is a rite of passage for developers, right?
It is. It's I feel like it was, interestingly enough, it's learning SharePoint is really what I feel like really brought me out of my shell, because SharePoint's such a collaborative and social technology. It's when I first did my first talk, like the listeners can't see, but that's my SharePoint shirt, from the very first conference that I spoke at, 10 years ago now. Just most of my good friends tech friends. I'll drop the tech part. They're just friends. They're my friends. I met through SharePoint. So, yeah, I owe a lot to .NET, but I probably owe a lot more to SharePoint, actually, surprisingly.
I totally get it. It's one of those technologies that, like you say, so collaborative, but then it's also really sort of extendable. And because it's .NET all the way down, you could just be like, yeah, I'll just write maybe a C# or a VB or whatever thing, and it will be there and everyone can use it, and it's relatively easy to maintain. I totally get it.
Yep. Absolutely.
But yeah, like I say, it's definitely a rite of passage. For some developers, it's like, hey, I'll go all in and start using it for everything. And some developers, it's like, hey, we need someone to create something for SharePoint. And it touches all of the .NET, I think. Almost anyone at least who has worked in like the Windows side of .NET, they must have used SharePoint at some point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a platform that gets everyone involved. So yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're not here to talk about SharePoint, but it is a wonderful story. But I mean, we can sit and talk about SharePoint. My experience with it is a bit lacking, I have to say. I have written some things that run alongside it and that sort of poke at some of the APIs, but I've never really gone, hey, I gotta go learn it and see all of the details. But maybe that's another show. I don't know.
Well, I'll come back and we could do all things SharePoint.
Excellent. That sounds good to me. That's another episode that I don't have to do much effort for.
There you go.
That's why we have guests on our shows, so we don't have to do anything.
There you go. Happy to help.
Thank you ever so much. But yeah, so we're going to be talking .NET and the cloud. And I'm very aware as we're recording this. So we're recording this 19th of November 2020. .NET 5 is not very long. It's been out for about a week or two, I guess.
It's a week old, yeah. Almost,
a week old. Excellent. I mean, there have been the release candidates, but this is like the official, hey,
official GA.
.NET 5 is here. Yeah.
It is here.
So I'm likely going to, and because of the Timecast pod machine wibbly wobbliness, we're recording this in advance of time. So there's likely going to be times when I say, hey, so when .NET Core is superseded by .NET 5, so please bear that in mind, everyone who's listening. We're recording this a couple of months ahead of time. So first of all, before we talk about any of that, right? You've said yourself, you've been in this industry for almost 20 years, right? For me, that's I mean, for anyone, that's a long time, right? That's a whole bunch of innovation that has happened since then. Like 20 years ago, we're talking about .NET was like an intranet-based technology for inside of the business, and now it runs a huge portion of the web. You've got Azure, or I suppose Azure. I'm not sure what the official pronunciation
is. There's no right or wrong way.
Oh, well, there you go then. Okay, so we've got Azure, that whole thing, and that's running .NET presumably, or you can run your .NET thing on it, and we've gone from, like I say, small web services to scaled microservices and video games and consoles, all running .NET. You can now run .NET on a fridge, which is just, it blows my mind.
I've got a bunch of Raspberry Pis somewhere around here that are controlling I just bought a house, so we're excited about, making our whole house smart enabled. So I'm excited to start using .NET Core on a bunch of Raspberry Pis, and controlling how long my stepdaughter gets to use the internet. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, right. It's brilliant. It's one of these technologies that just scales almost everywhere. You talked about the Raspberry Pi. I've got one of the Raspberry Pi 400s.
Oh, nice.
Which is a Raspberry Pi inside of a keyboard. Nice. It's all one big full kit. And I've been using that to do all sorts of crazy .NET things over the past week. And I'm teaching my brother, who's not a developer, to code with it. So I was like, hey, come learn what I do. And it's just bring the keyboard and plug it. Well, I mean,
there you go.
He came over before the unfortunate. Over in the UK, we've had like a lockdown, so nobody can go anywhere. And so he came over a few days before that, and we couldn't get him home in time. So he's staying here for the duration. So by the time you're listening to this, hopefully he's gone home. But I thought, to keep him busy, let's teach him to write some code. It's
there you go.
Totally doable, right?
That's fun.
Yeah.
That's fun.
But then, so if we're looking at almost 20 years in the industry, what are, in your opinion, some of these innovations that have really changed the game? I mean, we talked about SharePoint being collaborative, bringing everyone together. .NET clearly has changed a whole bunch of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Is it purely a Microsoft thing that you're thinking, or is it just, hey, here's the thing?
I think for me, I love tech, but I also love the people in tech. And I think for me, what I've loved that's changed is sort of how we work together. So I remember when I first started in tech, I started working for this. We built the first installation of this insurance company, Allstate's. Their first online web presence. So we built their first kind of web application, and that took hundreds and hundreds of people. And it was all these very, very, very siloed teams, right? There was a huge team of database administrators. I have no idea what they did. There was a huge infrastructure team. And I have no idea. I mean, I got a chance to talk to some of them, but there was a huge infrastructure team. There was a huge DevOps. Well, we call them the build guys, but huge build and DevOps team. And then there was all these teams that came together to build this amazing web application. But we were all really, really, really siloed, I felt like. And it was everything was so very, very, very specialized. Whereas you flash forward today, and I feel like the development team and the infrastructure engineers and site reliability engineers. While there's different fancy titles for everyone, but that team's shrunk significantly. And we all work really, really well together. It's not kind of this staunchy kind of separation of people. It's a much more collaborative team. We work much closer together, because I think the tools and the technologies have evolved in such a way that, everyone can kind of sort of work together much better. So I think that part's been, super, super exciting. And because of that, we're able to get, it's more satisfying. You can see applications getting released, all the time. I mean, you get huge companies like Netflix, they're releasing features every day. So it's really exciting to see the pace and the change, of how software and how technology evolves. And then I also think the amount of information and of how to get involved in tech, it's come to a place where I'm excited that so many people, like you were just talking about your brother, you're literally just teaching him how to code. And so literally, in a couple, after lockdown, he can apply at Microsoft and get a job. Right?
Absolutely. I'll tell him Labrina said apply to Microsoft.
Exactly. So, but I love this. I love, because of, I came from, I originally am from Chicago. I came from, modest family, and a lot of people around me are in modest living. And so I really love that, technology has started to become a good equalizer, providing a lot more people opportunities to be able to code, to be able to change, and then thereby, getting great jobs, and then thereby kind of really changing their lives. So it's not, I love seeing, really kind of technology for all and coding for all, this whole push for that. That's what's really got me super excited about this industry now.
That's awesome. I have to agree. The just the ability for anyone to sort of pick up the knowledge and say, hey, I want to learn to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
It may cost you the price of a book, but the example that I gave to my brother before we started .NET stuff, it was, let's do JavaScript, right? You've got a web browser, you've got a text editor, you have everything you need.
Yep.
You've also got this guy sitting here sort of poking at you saying, right, type it like this and type it like that. Or if you get stuck, you can go to Google and just type in, how do I do this in JavaScript? And there's all the information.
Yeah, I can literally, I love Twitter. Like, I literally can tweet, like, who's done this? And, I get 10 perfect strangers from all over the world that give me answers. So, yeah, it's amazing.
It really is. It really is. And just that, like you said, that democratizing of the knowledge to that, reducing that barrier to entry, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember because I took computer science at university, and in my own time as a kid, I was going to the library, get the book, learn how a computer works, and I went through that. I was lucky enough to go through that journey, but some people aren't lucky enough to go through that journey, and just being able to go, I want to learn to code. I'm going to hit Google and type in, how do I learn to code? And all of that information is there. You don't have to go to university. You don't have to buy the books. You don't have to, because if you're if you're fortunate enough to have a computer, you've got what you need.
Yep, you got
Let's
everything.
get you started,
Yeah, you've got
and let's share that knowledge. Yep. Yeah. And I think that it's been a long time coming, I think, that anyone can sort of join in, and being able to, I feel like there was a movement when I started back in, the early 2000s of, let's try and help people get started. But I think it's so much better now.
Yeah.
So many people going, hey, here's my experiences, and let me try and like coach people, and can I find an apprentice or something like that? Let's give back.
Yeah.
And like back then, that wasn't the case. It was, it felt very much like I have the prestige because I know how to do this. It's like, well, that's not what it's for. Let's go and help someone else. And that's great. I absolutely love it. It really is. To be able to see people just sort of appear and go, oh, like, when so before I became a professional, because I'm not a professional developer, straight out of uni, there were no development jobs. And so I went in and started teaching. I was teaching at a school, and I used to do this like computer club stuff during lunchtimes and after school. Let's learn HTML. And I think, just right, let's get your name on screen, and there's a website. Boom. And some of these, 11, 12-year-olds were going, oh my goodness, I've just literally made this, and then we started messing with HTML5 canvases. I mean, we had to build up to it, but hey, now you're moving something around on screen, and guess what? It exists. Go home and you could do it on your computer. Yeah. You can just run it on your, and just that moment of, wow, you see all these ideas form. Let's do all this creativity stuff. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about that. I also do a lot. I volunteer a lot with STEM organizations. So there's a couple here in the U.S., like Black Girls Code, that I volunteer a lot with, that teaches young girls 7 to 17 about coding and equipping them for jobs in STEM. And I've been volunteering with this organization for about 4 years now. And it's been super rewarding to see, that very thing. Like, we have these day-long sessions where they'll do things like, learn HTML and CSS or learn JavaScript. And it's been exciting to see, the enthusiasm and they're like, I can learn that. And even just, listing some of the conversations that we have. We did a session around machine learning, where they kind of built a little facial recognition app, super kind of small, but some of the questions that they were thinking about and around ethical AI, and I'm like, these are middle 10, 11, 12-year-olds, and we're having this conversation. So I'm super excited about that. And then it was exciting last year. Some of the girls were like, oh, this HTML and CSS and JavaScript, that's so easy now. Like, we want more challenging curriculum. And I mean, what an amazing problem to have, right? So, yeah, so we're looking at things like Python to going forward and stuff like that. So it's like, it's very exciting to see that. So that's something that I'm definitely really passionate about, is making sure that, like you were saying, like the technology or learning to code isn't just for like, the upper crust, but it should be something that if you have that desire, if you have that passion, absolutely go for it.
Yep, absolutely. I agree completely. Because I feel like it's something that it's already touching everyone's lives anyway, right?
Yeah.
With, the street lights, there's cameras everywhere, but there's street lights, there's computers in your car.
Yep.
I'm wearing one on my wrist.
Yep.
I've got, there's a bunch of different devices around me. They're all there. They all run on software. Let's make something, right?
Yeah.
And then, these Raspberry Pis, Arduinos, all these kinds of things. Let's just make some little thing and just does this thing. And then you, like you say, you see these creative little thoughts going on. Maybe it's the ethics of ethical AI. Maybe it's, can I make this thing draw a circle? Whatever it is, you see these things happening and these ideas, and then the people that you're talking to are able to then go in a completely different direction with the rest of their lives, going, hey, this is totally accessible to me. I can do this. I don't have to worry about it. Like you say, it's only for these specific people or whatever. Everyone can do it. Everyone should do it. Absolutely. And why not, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Excellent. We've gone on a little bit of a tangent there, but I really like it. I really like it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is your, because you work at, you said yourself, you work at Microsoft, you part of the let's move everyone to the cloud, and you're a very big advocate for the cloud. All of my projects I literally go, hey, Azure, figure it out.
Absolutely.
I'm like, here's my code, Azure, figure it out. And that's what I really like about when I'm using Azure. It's just, hey, here's an app or an app service, or hey, a container, just that I don't have to worry about it.
Set it and forget
right?
it.
And it just, the URL gets generated, all of the network traffic is all figured out for me. It's like DevOps on like turned up to 11. I don't have, but I don't have to do anything. I just go figure it out, right? But I was wondering, what's your, the advocacy that you bring for bringing people to the cloud? Without wanting to sound confrontational, what's so great about it? Right? What's so great about Azure? What's so great about the cloud? Is it quite literally what I've just said there, or is it like?
I think for me, it and for a lot of organizations, it helps them focus on the things that they like to do and that they're good at, right? I really like my current job, where I'm working with a lot of startups and partners who have some amazing there's some really cool stuff that they're thinking about and that's coming to bear. And so, but if you imagine you're a startup, you're 10, you're 20 people, right? But you're all a bunch of developers, working to build some really, really cool tech. Well, traditionally, in order to get that really cool tech out to your customers or out to the masses, you needed to hire a bunch of infrastructure people who really understood servers and understood all of the networking and all of these capabilities. And, when you're trying to move fast, that's not necessarily something that you can do or at any time, right? Like, it gives, so I feel like, moving to the cloud, let us, let Microsoft, let Azure kind of handle some of those, patching of virtual machines and dealing with some of the security issues and all of those things. Let us, kind of handle that and let you focus on the innovations and doing the cool stuff. And we'll kind of do for me, the cloud, the cloud does the grunt work, right? Like the not so glamorous stuff. And then you can get to focus on, innovating and building like cool stuff, right? So I think that's where I see a lot of my customers wanting to move to the cloud because, they're really good at the things that they do, right? They don't want to become networking and server experts, right? They want to be able to focus on their business and focus on the tech that they know. So I think that for me, it just makes a lot of sense in that respect. And it just allows you to just go faster, right? Like you were saying, like all the time, like I build a quick application, I click a button and, just as simple as that, especially when you're just trying to kind of, the purpose of what I'm trying to do is just to prove, if I click that button, then a circle appears. I don't want to ask a question. I don't want to have to deal with finding a server, provisioning, setting up that server, setting up the networking. Like, I just want to be able to like, hey, did my code work? Can you see my code on the other side? Can you see my code wherever you are? Okay, cool. So I think for me, that's where the cloud is so important and Azure is so important.
I completely agree, and it totally makes sense. One of the things that I did when we were in the Blazor 0.3 timeframe, so just like the first public preview, I watched one of the talks with Steve Sanderson, and I went, I get it, but I gotta see this. I gotta see this. So I was like, pull down the code, type some stuff, and I was like, oh wow, type some more stuff. And 25 minutes later, I had a big video game fan, right? So 25 minutes later, I had a Pokédex, essentially.
Ooh.
Just a Pokemon thing completely in Blazor. It was .NET from front to back. It wasn't my API. It was using there's like an open source Pokemon API. And all it was doing was putting in HTTP requests and then doing some JSON deserializing. But then it was doing Blazor stuff to dynamically show things on screen and things like that. And it was all completely .NET. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I went, I can't send this to my brother because he doesn't know how to get it running. But I didn't have to because it was like, okay, so, I know Docker. I know containers. I don't need to handle setting up I just go, hey, Azure, here's a Docker container. And then I go right click, copy URL, paste. Hey, Mark, that's my brother's name, right? Hey, Mark, check this thing. I just built it now. And he's like, wow, what's this? This is a Pokemon API. I can run it. And I said to him, yeah, you sat at your computer, go to it on your phone. He's like, what? And he's got, this Pixel 2 or whatever. And he's like, oh, wow, it just literally runs, Amazing stuff. And just being able to send that link around to whoever needs it without having to, like you say, I didn't have to provision a server, didn't have to get an IP address, didn't have to worry about HTTPS certificates, didn't have to worry about DNS propagation because that happened like in moments. I was like, okay, I've got to wait 2 days for it. No, it's live now.
Very quick.
What?
Yeah, it's awesome. That's super awesome. We'll have to talk offline. I didn't know that they had those APIs. We'll have to chat offline about that. I'm super excited to hear more.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So this may be a bit pulling the curtains back a little bit or talking a little bit too much about your job. Please let me know if it is too much. But let's say someone comes to you and says, I think I need to move to the cloud. How do you figure out whether I need to move to the cloud or not? Like, I'm building some awesome stuff. I've got this amazing app and it's wonderful. It's maybe it's the not a hot dog app from Silicon Valley or something, right? And I want to move it to the cloud. How do you know whether, like, should I move it to the cloud? Do I have to move it to the cloud? Or, like, how do you figure all of that stuff out?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's really about working with the customer, understanding what their goals are, making sure that it's not just because it's cool. Although it is, that isn't a great answer, but should not be the answer. And then also really understanding, where they are in their understanding of cloud. Because there is some, new skills that, your team has to learn. Are you able to take that on? Do you have people that are interested in doing that or are willing to do that? It's not, unfortunately, moving to the cloud, there's no easy button. I mean, sure, you can do some quick prototyping and things like that, like we were talking about. Like, yeah, that's like totally if I'm just building, something for fun. But if you're, running, some large application, right? There are some additional things that you need to think about. So those are the things that I really try to kind of work with organizations and getting them really prepared for the cloud, because there are some things that you have to think about.
I mean, that makes total sense. But what I'll say to you, Labrina, is I've just made my first app and I want a million users to use it because I've heard Netflix runs in the cloud. That's the right
That
answer,
is right. Yeah, because because it's cool is always the right answer. Absolutely.
Excellent. So then, I wonder if you could maybe talk to us about some of the. You talked there about there's a bit of a learning curve. All right, I'm let's say I'm used to doing. We don't tend to talk about it these days, but let's say I'm used to doing FTP, right click, create a zip file, go over and drop it into the server and then just hope that it reboots and comes online, right? Or it's an IaaS server and, I'm swapping, I've got to right click deploy, but I've got to put the right password in and someone has to come in and do a little dance to make it work because nobody really knows the actual process for actually deploying anything anymore because the person who used to deploy it left 2 years ago and didn't document it. So apart from things like that, the effectively the Brent in the Phoenix project sort of thing. What are some of the most unique challenges you've seen people come to you with? Well, we can't really put this on the cloud because the cloud's all alien and it's new and wonderful, but it's all alien and we can't learn it because it must be complex, right? So if you can, like, what are some of the most difficult challenges?
Yes, I think they're sure, absolutely. So there's a couple of things that we should think about. So one of the things I know a lot of times people really just want to move to the cloud because they might want to get out of their existing data centers or things like that, and they do what we call as a lift and shift, which means that I'm just going to pick up my existing application that's running over here and either on premise or some other data center, and I'm just going to put it in Azure and run it on a VM there. And so some of the so that's a lower degree of difficulty, but it's also less of a reward with running in the cloud. It's sort of like I recently just bought a house and I'm thinking about moving, so a lot of my analogies will be around that. So sort of like we call lift and shift, when I'm trying to clean out my closet, I basically take all the clothes that are in one closet and put it in another closet without actually going through the effort of, saying that like those bell bottoms that I had from, 20 years ago. Yeah, I probably don't need those anymore or whatever. So that's sort of the first thing. So I think that's a great approach and that's a great first step for a lot of organizations, but you really don't get kind of the benefit of the cloud. It's good in that, hey, we got our feet wet in learning about the cloud and understanding some of the things, but you're not going to achieve some of the cost savings and elasticity and all of that good stuff in that manner. And so, but it makes sense a lot of times for customers because they do have code that's maybe, a little old, has some interesting things. And I love when I'm on customer calls and the first thing they're like, "You're not going to believe this." And I'm like, I'll believe it. It's like, we're doing this, or some things. So, as I said, with the cloud, if you move more into what's called platform as a service, where there's even a higher level of management that the cloud gives you, while that allows you to get more savings, more elasticity, more scalability. You're even less in like managing, but because of that, there's less things that we allow you to touch, right? So you're not able to, we sort of abstract away the VMs, right? So let's say you're deploying just, your standard, your Pokemon application into app service, which is platform as a service. That's great. But let's say you also wanted to interact with the file system because you were saving things straight to the file system. Well, in a traditional app service, in an app service, you can't really do that because we sort of because we might move you around actually in VMs, like behind the scenes, you don't really know, and you don't really have access to that stuff. So there's a lot of rules, not a lot, but there's some rules, like, right, like if we're providing all this management capabilities, there's some things that maybe now you have to not do. So sometimes you have to re-architect or make some subtle changes to your application. But like sometimes a lot of organizations, it's a good time to do that, but there's also effort in doing that, right? So, it's a good time again, right? Like I'm moving now, so this gives me an opportunity to look at, do I really need those plates that I got from McDonald's? Yeah, they looked cool, but can I really get rid of it, or could I really change these things out? So when you're also moving to the cloud, it gives you an opportunity to start, gives you a fresh pair of eyes to start looking at your application, looking at how you can, achieve, more scalability, more flexibility. So those are all things that I think a lot of organizations kind of should start thinking about when moving to the cloud.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you that this episode is sponsored by Datadog. Also, stick around for the next 30 seconds to find out how you can get a free t-shirt. Datadog are a monitoring and analytics platform which monitor your infrastructure, application performance, and log management. Are you looking to move to the cloud, microservices, or .NET Core? Datadog can help with that. Their distributed tracing and APM provide end-to-end visibility into requests wherever they go, whether it's across hosts, containers, or service boundaries. See it for yourself. Start a 14-day trial today and Datadog will send you a free t-shirt. Find out more at datadoghq.com/.NET Core. That's datadoghq.com/DOTNETCORE, or check the show notes for a link. I mean, that makes sense, right? Because like in development, we talk about sort of abstracting things away in a single responsibility, right? So if the thing which runs your app and all it's doing is running your app, that has the responsibility of running your app. If you want to store some files, go store them in a file storage, right? Because I know that there's file storage and blob storage and all these kinds of different storage options, right? So that has the responsibility of looking after your files. Go store it over there. You want a SQL Server, I guess, you go to the SQL Server bit that has the single responsibility of looking after your database, right? You don't want to throw it all in one place. I do know that from my own past experience, some of my apps, before I moved them to the cloud, everything was on that site. We've got IIS on there, we've got Node on there, we've got the Redis caches on there, the SQL Server database was on there, we've got the file storage on there, and I'm like, that's great, but okay, watch this, and I pull the Ethernet cable out, and I'm like, that's brilliant, but now Grab's dead.
Oh yeah, all your eggs are in one basket. Yeah, and like I said, I mean, sometimes you just got to move. Sometimes they're customers and they choose to just move it there for that bit of time. And it makes sense. because there's some learnings from just, moving your application as it is to the cloud. But yeah, you definitely want to start thinking about how you could modernize it and really make it more of a cloud native solution.
Sure, yeah, and that makes sense because I've always apart from on my actual computers, any file system that I interact with, I'm always thinking, well, this isn't going to be around forever. I need to get the files off of here, right? And the same thing with we talk about the same thing in like containers. You containerize your app, the file system is never going to be there because the instance of that container can go down and come straight back up, and all the
Yeah,
files you just
that
wrote
is
there are
not
gone,
permanent
right?
storage.
And exactly, right? But I guess because for the longest time as developers, we've always had that permanent storage on that server. We have to learn a few things and maybe just move it over here or move it over there. And if it's, I feel like if it's on the same service, like we talked a lot about Azure, but let's just say, there is AWS and GCP and all those others, right? But let's say you're storing it all on one service, not a server, then maybe they're in the same data center, maybe they're on the same machine, I don't know, but the communications between them will feel like they are, right? It's not like you're going from the data center in, I'm just going to pick some cities, right? It's not like you're going from the data center in Dallas all the way to the data center in Tokyo just to get your files. They're quite literally next to each other. So you're not going to feel the hit. It feels like it's right next to each other. It feels like it's on that disk. It's just, you're making an API call, but it's
Yeah,
on the disk,
absolutely. I
right?
mean, I think a lot of times people feel like, oh, there's going to be this, to your point, this latency, these huge latency issues between communications. And yeah, there's all kinds of the data centers are close enough, and the racks and things are close enough where that's not going to be an issue. And again, there's other things where within the cloud, all of the disaster recovery and backups and all those things that need to happen, we're taking care of that for you, right? So, like for example, if you upload a file into blob storage, we're making 3 copies of that for you, just in case like something happens. Like, so to your point, when you're on prem, are there 3 copies of your of your file system when you uploaded it? And I upload a file from your IIS webs or IIS server into your file system. No, so there's a lot more, kinds of. There are experts that have really thought about latency and disaster recovery and resiliency much more deeply than probably a mere mortal like myself has. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense. Like, I do remember very, very early in my career, I was doing something and left a transaction open on SQL Server, and just doing that, right? That nothing can happen on your SQL Server. And then I came back the next day and was like, oh, I was supposed to schedule a backup last night and it didn't work because I left the transaction
Uh-oh.
open. And then someone unplugged the server, and then the spinning disk it was on died, and I've lost it all. And it's like 24 hours of records gone, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And even if you had a backup system in that example, because I left the hanging transaction, the backup system never happened. So it's like,
Yeah.
too many, all of these moving parts, and they're all broken. And you don't have to. If Azure or any of the other providers are taking that many backups for you, you don't have to, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I like it. So then, okay, so I'm a solo developer. Let's say I work as a single. I'm working on my epoch shattering app. All right, it may be the Pokemon app. It may be is it a hot dog? Is it not a hot dog app? Or maybe it's something that will genuinely change the world for the better.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, right, okay, I've got my app, it's running, I've got my whole stack running on my machine or machines, I've got my mobile app ready, I've got, the desktop client ready, I've got it all ready, and I want to move it to the cloud. Do I need to? How do I figure out which resources within Azure I need to use, right? Because let's say I've got a couple of servers, I've got a cache, I've got a whole. But let's play buzzword bingo, right? We've got microservices, we've got Bitcoin, we've got Redis, we've got SQL Server, we've got Xamarin, we've got all these different myriad different things that are all glued together, and I have to run a script on my computer to set the whole thing up because it's so complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how do I know which resources in Azure my bits of infrastructure will slot into? Is that a case of just read through the documentation and 3 days later you just get it? Or is it get in touch with someone like Labrina and say, hey, I want to move, but I don't know how? What's the process?
Yeah, so I would say there's a couple of different resources. I would definitely go out to aka.ms/learn, and there's a ton of learn modules. There's a couple of really good ones that sort of bridge the gap, right? So I'm a .NET developer, and I want to deploy my application onto Azure, right? So there's some really good learn modules that sort of systematically take you through building out, how. So first you start with there's a sample application that you traditionally might build that you know about, right? I've got a .NET web application, I've got an API, I've got SQL Server, and some cache and Redis cache, right? So I know how to build that on my laptop. That's totally fine. And so what I like about those learn modules is that it takes you through now, how do I systematically deploy that to Azure, right? So first I've got to set up an app service and then deploy my web app there. And then how do I set up Azure SQL and deploy my SQL database there? So it's those are sort of really good ways, I think I think those are really good ways to sort of like learn by doing, right? And then that sort of helps you build the foundation. Or same way, like if you like I want to containerize my application. All right, same scenario, but I've decided to containerize it for whatever reason. There's a similar learn module that will take you through the same steps. So I kind of like that approach. And then once you sort of get that foundation under your belt, then you can kind of start exploring the documents, because you've got a good, you got your foundation right. So I think that's a really, really, really good approach to kind of getting started.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it's much better than sitting here and just reading the documentation, right? Because,
yeah.
I mean, more power to you if you can learn really deep knowledge just by reading documentation. But I've always found that a worked example or something that, hey, I've got multiple screens. I've got the video over here with someone from the .NET team or someone from the Azure team or someone from Microsoft talking me through it, and I've got my IDE over here, PowerShell, and a couple of things, and I'm like, oh right, okay, so I type this here. Oh, yep. Right, there it is. It's running. I've got the URL.
Yeah,
it's running. I like that.
Yeah, and I like it, and they could build on each other, right? So now I've got my application running, but I manually deployed that. So now my next step is like, how do I actually build some build automation into it so that when I check in because I'm a developer, I know about checking in code, I know about pull requests, code reviews, I know how to do that, but then how do I make it so that now I have some automation? So I think it's just sort of taking those steps that you do as a developer and then sort of making the dotted lines to, okay, now how do I deploy this in Azure or how do I deploy this to the clouds?
Sure. I mean, so for myself, I've just finished a project where I was building something with, it was a .NET Core API, React front end, and a bit of Python behind that, and some networking and some Docker and some all sorts of stuff. And I do know we hosted the code in GitHub. It's all in a private repository hosted in GitHub, and we had a GitHub action. As soon as I committed anything to one of the branches, it would build like it was using GitHub Actions. It would build everything for me, and then throw it out to Azure, and then it would come back with a URL and say, "Hey, here's your test URL." And it will only exist for the next maybe 15 minutes or something, because I had a little cron job that would then go through, and there was like a regex for the test URLs, and it would just wipe them out. I could have done that better with like the deployment slots, but this was throwing something together really quickly, and it wasn't
I like it.
brilliant. But yeah, so you had this play area you could play with for 15 minutes to make sure it worked, and then you could then spin that back up on demand. So when it came around to code reviews, if there's something wasn't brilliant, you could say, "Hey, well, go check this out," and that kind of helped, because there was a little bit of a learning curve involved in that, but that would have been something I'd have done locally anyway, because we have dev, UAT, all these different environments and staging and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, I feel, at least from my point of view, it was taking the knowledge that I already had in disparate parts and just going, "Oh, so this is how you do it with this, or this is how you do it with," it's like, "Oh, well, I already know how to Dockerize things, and I know how to spin up an environment on my local machine. So how do I do it over there using some API, or how do I do it over there using some function or something?" And it feels like that's very much like we already have the Lego pieces, right? Yep. We just need the blueprint for sticking it together.
Yeah, and I think it's exciting because I think it sort of it gives you a lot more control as a developer to be able to do that. Like I remember actually the reason why I learned Azure, actually really almost when it started, like in 2010, was because back in the day, if you needed a virtual machine from someone, you had to surrender your firstborn child or something to get a virtual machine. And I was like, "Hey, I'm writing some code and building some stuff. I just want to play around with it, and I need to show it to customers, so I can't just be running only on my laptop." And I was like, "Oh yeah, could someone provision a virtual machine?" And you get the form from the IT person that's like, "Why do you need this? How long are you going to have it for? Where's your firstborn child or kidney or lung that you have to give?" And, and and of course I wasn't willing to do that. So the IT person was like, "Nah, we're not going to give you a virtual machine." Mm-hmm. And that was when I actually started learning about the cloud, about Azure. And back then it was web roles and things like that. But and it was awesome. Like I was able to, I built this kind of cool application that I wrote, and I was able to deploy it and sort of teach myself that way. So same way that I sort of taught you, but it is really exciting because again, that's like sort of removing that barrier from developers and giving you kind of more control, which is cool.
Sure. I have to say I did something quite similar. I was at a 24-hour hackathon, and I was this was many, many years ago, and I'd taken my MacBook Air because I was like, I'm going to be there. I've got to take it to and from where I'm staying. I want it to be small, portable, light, last a while, and that sort of fit that bill at the time. And I got there, and I was like, "Okay, what are we going to do, team?" And they went, well, we're going to build something with .NET Framework." Oh no. Okay. And it's going to run on Windows. Oh, you mean I got to get Parallels installed and surrender all of my hard drive space? And I ummed and ahed for maybe 10, 15 minutes about how I was going to actually help the team out. Because at that point I was like, I can't do it's an Air, and it's got 128 gigs of hard drive space. With installing everything on top of it, it's not going to work. And then I thought to myself, well, I have Azure, and I have Azure credits, and I have, wait a minute, they do VMs in the cloud. VMs with Visual Studio installed on the cloud. And I have a working Wi-Fi. Aha! So I went, you know what, I'll take the hit. I spun up a VM in the cloud, installed Visual Studio, installed all the tools, and I had effectively, it would have cost me if I'd have tried this out, but I had effectively infinite hard drive space, infinite CPU power, infinite RAM, as long as I had that internet connection. And most of the build was being done on the build server anyway. So I was like, hey, I've got this Windows VM for 24 hours for this hackathon, and I need this. I don't even need a very powerful machine. And I've done it with some of my customers before. We've brought in designers, and they've been, I forgot to bring my work laptop or whatever, my super duper powerful machine that I need to use with Photoshop, but I've got the resources with me, and I'll go, okay, where's your machine? Right, here's your VM with Photoshop installed. You have to put your own license key in it. I'm not going to give you a license key, but hey, there it is. Oh, brilliant! I could just do the work here. Wonderful, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And that was my gateway into Azure was, hey, I need a VM for 24 hours to do development on. And
It's awesome.
yeah. So then, so we're talking, like I said earlier at the beginning of the episode, we're talking a week into .NET 5. And my provisional plan puts this episode coming out in February of 2021. I think I put 2020 in the notes. So yeah, a little bit of insider baseball, folks. We communicate a little bit and build up an idea of what we're going to talk about. And I said this episode's coming out in February 2020. So somehow I'm going back further into the past.
Going back in time.
Yeah. But we're a week into .NET 5, and you've said yourself you're a .NET developer, and I'd love to know what is the one feature or the small list of features that are coming in .NET 5 that folks have had a chance to use for months now, but I haven't had a chance to because it's only been out for a week. Do you have a number one feature that you really are excited about, or is it just a case of, hey, this is just brilliant because it just works and it's wonderful?
I think there's a couple. So one is definitely top level programs. Mm-hmm. So really that gives you the opportunity to start just writing without all the ceremony of building out building out a function or a method and like main and all that. I can just start writing code, which I think one of the things a lot of the developers now appreciate that. Like that's how developers start, right? That's been a long time complaint with .NET is that, there's so much boilerplate, there's so much ceremony to getting started. And, other languages like Python, I just start typing and things magically happen, right? So, I'm excited for that. And then also records, which is really, really, really huge game changer in terms of being able to build things and make them immutable, building objects and making them immutable, really. So those are kind of my two favorites. I think kind of under the covers, there's been a lot of work to help with performance, with reducing the overall sort of size of when you hit build, everything gets outputted, reducing that overall kind of size. So I think in terms of those things, that's also really, really huge. So generally I'm excited about those things. I'm also excited that we now just have .NET 5. And next year it will be .NET 6 and so on and so forth. And the year after that, it'll be .NET 7. And we can look for a release every year. So November 2021 will be .NET 6. November 2022 will be .NET 7. And there's no more, is it .NET Framework or is it .NET Core or is it this? We have one naming convention, we have one thing, because I think if I had a top one question that I got asked or that I get asked is, should I learn .NET Framework or should I learn .NET Core, and what's the difference and what does that mean? And so I'm excited from sort of that position that personally I'll no longer get asked that I'll no longer have to get asked that question of what's the difference between all these different versions or iterations of .NET. So we'll just have one thing. So yeah, that's exciting.
I have to say, in some of the circles that I travel in, not necessarily the technology related ones, where people have heard of the different programming technologies, but they're not really, oh, I know the name Java, I know the name .NET, I know the name Python, they know that these things exist. And they for a long time, they've always known .NET is Windows. It's Windows with a Windows thing, and it does the Windows stuff. Mm-hmm. And then when I come to them and they say, hey, what, you've been doing .NET on your Linux machine for 2 years? How does that work? Oh, let me tell you about this, right? Yeah. Let me tell you, .NET Core, .NET 5, .NET 6 is wonderful. You can run it anywhere. And like I said at the top of the show, I can run it on a fridge.
Exactly.
It's wonderful. It runs everywhere.
Yeah, that's exciting. I actually have a machine. I'm starting to understand. I'm actually beginning to be a Linux convert. So I actually see what everyone's been talking about all these years. I've got a machine that's totally Linux. I've got a Visual Studio running on it. So I can do all my development there. No distractions. I'm super quick. So yeah, it's definitely exciting.
Mm-hmm. I've always been of the opinion that, hey, if using this tool makes you super productive and you're good at it and using it and it gets the job done, use it.
Yep.
So if somebody says to me, oh, you should use Windows for this or you should use Mac for that, and I'm like, well, which am I better at? I'm better at using Windows for this task and maybe Linux for this task and maybe Mac OS for that task. Let me do it my way and I will get it done. I'll get it done faster. Let's not get... I know that there used to be a phrase of people used to use the word evangelical about it. I'm not worried about the connotations of that word, but let's not get angry about why aren't you using this technology? Well, I'm using the technology that I'm using because I'm good at using that one. Let's just do that because that gets the job done, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do feel though as though for the majority of .NET developers, learning another operating system, or rather learning an operating system other than Windows, might be required from now on, because it's like, yeah, you can run just on Windows, but some of your customers may not be running Windows anymore because it now runs everywhere.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean you have to go out and buy a fridge specifically so you can run your app to test it there, but maybe you should, right? I don't know. It's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting. I think it just, again, like how we were talking, it just brings everyone into the fold, right? Like now, whatever kind of laptop, whatever kind of system you want to run with it, and come one, come all. So
exactly,
it's exciting.
Exactly. So let's have a look. So what we'll do some wrap up questions if that's all right, Labrina.
Sure.
How do people keep up with some of the things you're up to, the work that you're doing? They want to learn a little bit more about the cloud stuff. How do they figure that out? Is it just, hey, I'll just shout up somewhere on Twitter and Labrina will just magically appear? What's the process?
Yeah, typically, I'm pretty active on Twitter, so you can catch me on Twitter. I'm at Chix, CHIX, can code, so Chix can code. And I tweet about Azure a lot and .NET a lot. Unfortunately, it's American football season, so on Sundays I also tweet about American football a lot. So if that's not your thing, probably don't look at my feed on Sundays, but the rest of the week is totally fine. So yeah, absolutely. And so soon coming, I've got some more media, YouTube videos coming soon, but if you follow me on Twitter, you can learn more about that.
Okay, excellent. And then would you say then that learning a bit about migrating to the cloud was that aka.ms/learn URL you gave out earlier on?
Correct. Yes. I would say that is a great starting point for really a lot of different training. Like if you're, want to just, nothing about machine learning and you just want to learn, how to spell it and just like learn it peripherally. That's a great place for kind of learning a lot of different things. But definitely if you're new to the cloud, I would definitely suggest going out to aka.ms/learn.
Okay, excellent. I do have to say that the idea of learning machine learning, right? When I was at university, artificial intelligence and machine learning was something that you had to choose to do, right? Which meant you had to be at the university to learn it, right? Whereas now I can just go to I can go on YouTube. What is machine
Yep,
learning?
take a
And
course.
there it
Yeah.
is. It's that democratizing of all of that information. I absolutely love it. Let's get more people involved, right?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, I think we did it off air, but we talked a little bit about the disrupting the cloud. I know that you were on a hiatus for a little while. You're planning on coming back. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Maybe we can get some more. I don't know. I don't think maybe the audience for my show isn't as big as the audience for yours, but maybe we get some crossover. That's some
Oh yeah,
sense of people over
absolutely.
here. Yeah.
So I had this vision a few months ago, actually more than a few months ago, about being able to show different voices and faces that are in cloud technologies, in the hopes to again get more people involved in doing cloud, perhaps as a career. We've definitely seen the growth of, through so many programs and things or for coding. So I would love to see. I had this kind of idea of creating a podcast that showcased, different, people from very different walks of life. Really focused on people of color and women who are in the industry coming together and talking about their journey in cloud, be it that, you're, kind of a cloud newbie that's starting, or if you're like, an old person like me who's been around for a while. So that's what Disrupting the Cloud is all about. So we had a couple of episodes. We did a couple episodes at the beginning of a couple months ago, and the response was really, really great. Had to take a little bit of a break, but we are starting fresh again in January. So again, you can also follow at Disrupting the Cloud or at Disrupt the Cloud to catch up on more on that too.
Awesome. Well, yeah, like I say, I can't say that the audience for the .NET Core podcast is that huge, but if a couple of people go over, that's one or two people extra. I don't know.
I would love it.
Yeah, right. Let's talk about the cloud.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay. Well, all that really remains to say, Labrina, is thank you ever so much for spending your afternoon talking to me about Azure and .NET and the cloud and all of these wonderful things, the places you can go to learn and stuff like that. It has genuinely been a pleasure, and I have had loads of fun. And I'm going to go do some more Azure stuff. I'm going to go learn some more Azure stuff because there's always something new to learn, right?
Absolutely. So and definitely reach out to me. You have my number and my address. So if you need any more help, I'm happy to help.
Excellent. I'll have to obviously send you the link to the Pokemon API as well.
Yes, definitely want to get that.
Excellent. Well, thank you ever so much, Labrina. It's been wonderful. Thank you. That was my interview with Labrina Loving. Be sure to check the show notes for a bunch of links to some of the stuff that we covered and a full transcription of the interview. The show notes, as always, can be found at .netcore.show, and there will be a link directly to them in your podcatcher. And don't forget to spread the word. Leave me a rating or review on your podcatcher of choice. Head over to .netcore.show/subscribe for ways to do that, and to come back next time for more .NET goodness. See you again real soon. See you later, folks. .NET Core Podcast is a production of RJJ Software Ltd.